Welcome back to Newswire with me, Ayza Omar. So we'll be talking a little about what's happening in the Eastern Mediterranean. French President Emmanuel Macron, he's sending warships to support Greece in the Eastern Mediterranean. That's the announcement that came over the weekend, where Turkey's bid to claim extensive maritime territory has actually escalated quite a bit of regional dispute, especially because this region is full of energy resources. Now, this is, of course, much to the delight of Greece's Prime Minister, who has welcomed the decisions. And it comes at a very critical time because Greece has been trying to rally support since December. In fact, since Turkey secured a maritime agreement with the UN-recognized government of Libya just at the end of last year, which essentially gave Turkey access to Eastern Mediterranean's precious and abundant oil and gas reserves. Now, Greece Prime Minister says that who met with actually Emmanuel Macron in Paris last week, says that these vessels that France is sending will act as guarantors of peace amid ongoing disputes with Turkey. So what we're looking at today is, will this be the case, or will France's move to send warships to an already tense region up the ante for regional players here? Let's find out what our guests have to say. We are joined by Mr. Ertan Karpazli, the editor-in-chief of Radio EastMed. He is joining us today from London, in fact. Also, we have Mr. Uluç Uzulka, a former Turkish ambassador. He was last posted in Paris. He's joining us today from Istanbul. Welcome to both of you. If I could start with you, Mr. Karpazli, this move has come in at a time when tensions are rife, especially after the Berlin summit that was seen early in January. Now, France sending warships, how will this affect the kind of scenario that has built up where tensions are rife between Greece and Turkey?
I don't think France is going to be a guarantor of peace. In fact, France is just going to escalate already very high tensions. We can see that with Turkey's move, with the deal that they made with the Libyan GNA, the internationally recognized government based in Tripoli, that already alarmed many European Union countries, particularly France and Greece especially, because as you may already know, the deal that was struck between Libya and Turkey at the end of 2019 was a demarcation deal to set the boundaries of each country's respective exclusive economic zone in the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, a lot of people may be wondering, well, what does this have anything to do with Greece? Actually, it has a lot to do with Greece, because Greece is arguing that the deal between Turkey and Libya is illegitimate, because that demarcation deal infringes upon Greece's own exclusive economic zone, which is very important for drilling, for natural resources, hydrocarbons in the region. Now, with France getting involved, it only escalates the problem, because now Greece has got a lot more gas behind their arguments regarding their rights in the Eastern Mediterranean against Turkey. Whereas if France was to not get themselves involved, Greece would have pretty much no choice but to engage with Turkey in some kind of negotiation about a demarcation deal between Athens and Ankara, which at the moment is non-existent. But with France getting involved, Greece does not have an incentive to actually engage in peaceful negotiations.
Right. So, Mr. Uzulka, what Mr. Karpazli is saying essentially that will make the situation worse. And it's ironic because France sending vessels there as peace guarantors, considering that Greece had already rejected the Turkish demand to demilitarize those 16 Aegean islands. And now the French president, who had also said that he was not very happy with the Turkey-Libya deal for obvious reason. He's been backing the Khalifa Haftar government. So your take on whether this will help at all, them moving their warships there in the Eastern Mediterranean?
I don't think that this problem will end with a confrontation between Turkey and Greece and France. All this is nothing but a psychological effect, creating steps, if you wish. First of all, don't forget that Turkey, Greece, and France are the three of them are NATO allies, and it's impossible for the NATO allies to have a war or a confrontation in this respect. And secondly, I think that this problem arises from the fact that Greece, together with some of its allies, Israel and Egypt, has signed an agreement among themselves for the delimitation of the economic zones in the Eastern Mediterranean, without taking into consideration the rights of Turkey. And they are, if I may define it shortly, they are simply trying to imprison Turkey in its territorial waters of 6 miles. And beyond that limit, the main land, as huge as the Anatolia, has nothing to say according to the views of the Greek side in comparison with the islands. And Turkey needs to be imprisoned in its own territorial waters. This is not acceptable, of course. And this problem is nothing but a prolongation of the Aegean problem. As you know, in the Aegean, if the territorial waters are increased to 12 miles, 3/4 of the sea will be an internal sea to Greece, and the warships from Turkey will need a permission from the Greek side to transit the Aegean. So this is not acceptable neither. The best way to solve the problem is to come together and negotiate and try to reach a just agreement which will cover the needs and the rights of both sides. So a unilateral approach is not producing any effect or any result, and moreover, it's creating only new tensions, and with these tensions, it's not possible to achieve anything at all, and none of these countries are eligible to extract the natural gas, which in the end is not for the time.
Mr. Uzul, you're saying that the unilateral approach is basically exacerbating the tensions there in the region. But then I'd come to you, Mr. Karpazli, in terms of how does one move forward from here? Because the situation has gotten bad to an extent that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, he's warned that these exploratory drillings for hydrocarbon resources of the coast of Cyprus, there are risks of major conflict. And with France entering the picture, can we expect then other allies like for Turkey, maybe Russia, step into the game and worsen the situation?
Well, there's many questions that I need to answer there. But before I really get into each and every one of them, I just want to state that my personal humble opinion is that the intention here on any side is not actually to exploit and extract and export natural gas from the Eastern Mediterranean. There are many experts who have written many reports saying that the proposed pipeline deal that will transport gas from the Eastern Mediterranean through Greece to Italy to Western Europe is actually not feasible. It's not economically feasible, and it's not scientifically feasible because of the high seismic activity in the Aegean region, particularly. The depths would just make it pretty much impossible to build and maintain that pipeline. And it would also be not commercially viable to actually export gas to Europe in this way. The same goes for LNG exports as well. Now, what I personally believe here, what really is going on is this pipeline is being used as an excuse by all sides to actually encourage a standoff, to encourage conflict. No one really wants a conflict, but at the same time they do. Because what's going on is Turkey is at this point in time in its history is at a point where if it doesn't start aggressively or assertively rather asserting itself in its region, it will gradually start declining until it collapses. Turkey needs some kind of confrontation, some kind of excuse to expand its influence, its soft power in the region. And this is something that's very alarming for countries like France or European Union countries who see a Turkish expansion in the region as more of a threat to them than an illegitimate leader in Khalifa Haftar in Libya seizing power. So this is why a lot of the European Union countries, such as France, are actually backing Haftar against the internationally recognized government. Now, where does Russia come into this? Now, Russia also has interests in the Eastern Mediterranean. Russia has been expanding its influence there since the Syrian civil war. Now, I don't believe that Turkey would have had the diplomatic strength to go into Libya without some kind of deal, some kind of guarantees from Russia. So I believe Russia's involved in that way. And Russia, as we can see as a state, they're trying to play a mediatory role in Libya. Now,
well,
what I
considering that
believe
Russia's
is really
been
going
supporting
on.
Khalifa Haftar, why would they be the sort of support that Turkey needed to get into Libya?
Russia's playing a double game in Libya. We have a lot of Russian mercenaries who have arrived in Libya to support Khalifa Haftar, but Russia as a state is trying to take on a mediatory role. Russia is trying to get themselves into the Eastern Mediterranean because this gas pipeline that has been proposed, should it ever come to fruition, is actually a direct competitor to Russian gas into Europe. And Europe has been trying to diversify its gas imports away from Russia ever since the war broke out in eastern Ukraine in 2014. So Russia does not want any other pipeline to Europe, whether it be from the Eastern Mediterranean or Central Asia or Caucasus, reaching Europe. Russia wants Europe to be dependent on Russian gas, and Russia will use Turkey, if necessary, to hamper or slow down, sabotage even, any efforts to extract the gas from the Eastern Mediterranean to Europe.
That's a really interesting point there. Mr. If I could get your take on this, the feasibility of the economic feasibility of taking this gas pipeline as it is envisaged as the between Israel, Egypt, Cyprus, so on, is been commented by many experts is just not feasible, and that this is, as Mr. Karpazli just said, is a way to provoke Turkey right now. But do you see it that way, that it's the time that Turkey needs to establish its existence, its dominance in the region in light of recent events?
Well, you have to consider these problems in the context of the general Middle Eastern case. Eastern Mediterranean is nothing but a prolongation of the Middle Eastern problem. And Libya as well is nothing but a prolongation of the same problem. So the Eastern Mediterranean actually is at stake among all those states who are willing to to dig and extract the natural gas, but at the same time who are willing to create a supremacy, politically speaking, in the region. So here, the two rivals, Russia and United States, from the point of view of the natural gas as well, one from the LNG point of view, the other one, the transportation by pipeline systems, they are both involved directly in the game. And as much as the Libyan problem is concerned, Turkey has signed an agreement. It's not an agreement in reality, but it's simply a protocol. And this protocol with the government, who's legally recognized by the United Nations Security Council. And now we have our economic zone established as well. And this zone is dividing the connection between Crete and Cyprus, and this is, of course, becoming an irritation from the Greek side. And altogether, I think that what my colleague was saying, his interpretation of the problem is quite right. Russia is playing a double game. I mean, on one hand, Russia is supporting the and on the other side, it's supporting Turkey and saying, don't worry, go on. But in the end, as you remember, today in Syria, there has been another confrontation last night, and this is going on to become a fierce battle between the two sides. So the two-sided approach of Russia, not only in Eastern Mediterranean, but generally speaking in all the region, is valid. And I think that I can fully share what has been already said by my colleague a while ago.
I think here you were referring to, Mr. Kerr, what has happened in Idlib just in the past 24 hours. There were 4 Turkish troops, I believe, who were killed in a Syrian offensive there in Idlib. as the Syrian regime is trying to retake an area they've lost for the past 9 years. And of course, Russia is right behind the Syrian regime here. But we saw the rebuttal from Russia, and as it's being interpreted, and Mr. Karpazli, do feel free to jump in here and give us your take, is that the kind of rebuttal Russia has given doesn't seem to show that the two newly formed alliances at any risk here, Turkey and Russia, that is.
Well, I believe that Russia sees itself as the superior in this kind of, I believe it's always been a temporary alliance between Russia and Turkey just to extract mutual interest in Syria. Mm-hmm. And Turkey is not happy with that. Turkey sees itself more as an equal to Russia in this alliance. And Turkey is trying to assert itself as an equal, but Russia is having none of it. Russia doesn't necessarily need to see Turkey as an equal in this alliance because Russia is really a superpower. It's probably the second most powerful country in the world after the USA. So Turkey is trying to, Russia is trying to put Turkey in its place in a way. And Turkey at the same time is going to do its absolute best to secure its defense, basically, against terrorist groups and all sorts of hostile threats that are coming from the region, even if that be at Russia's expense. Now, how long is this going to last? At some point, Russia is going to have to accept that Turkey, the only way they can work with Turkey is to give Turkey something. Right. I think they will have to go into talks and they'll have to try and figure out, where to draw the lines.
Right. And here, Mr. Ozulko, what is the role that the U.S. is playing? Because there was a phone call that took place between President Trump and President Erdogan on January 28th. The U.S. came out with a completely different statement, as Turkey did. They've played a very sort of backbench role when it comes to the Eastern Mediterranean, and especially Libya also. What is your take on right now the priority that President Trump has in the Eastern Mediterranean?
United States in reality has three different opinions, actually. The first one is President Trump's opinion, and I think that it's closer to Turkey than the two others. The second one is the Congress. We know that Congress is reacting against Turkey very fierce. And the third one is the military side. And it seems as if the military side is divided in opinion among themselves. So as long as President Trump stands closer to Turkey, particularly in his relation with the Turkish President Erdogan, I think that the United States support for Turkey is becoming extremely clear and decisive. And as such, I need to underline two things. The first one is that the interest of President Trump in this respect is to cut off as much as possible the relations between Russia and Turkey, because Turkey, from its geostrategic point of view, as much as it's belonging to the NATO alliance, is a trump for the United States, and President Trump is not willing that Turkey gets away from in both ways from the United States.
Right.
So even now, it's 100% sure that United States is also playing a double game. And on one hand, it's vis-a-vis Turkey, it's for and against.
Right.
And for example, when it comes to the Eastern Euphrates, there all of a sudden Russia and the United States come together and decide against Turkey on a joint alliance.
Okay, Mr. Ozulko, unfortunately, we've run out of time there, but the crux of it essentially is Russia and the U.S. both have double games because of their interest there in the region. But France's move to move warships to support Greece right now is going to be seen, as we both seen, you agree, a provocative move, not helping in de-escalating tensions there. With that, Mr. Karpazli and Mr. Ozulko, thank you so much for your analysis. We've come to the end of the program. Tomorrow we'll see you again with a new episode of Newswire, more news and analysis from around the world. Goodbye.